All right, guys. So is everybody good with that? Did everybody find that? Did anybody not find that? Okay. So tonight we are going to do Photoshop in a big way. So I need everybody to go ahead and start Photoshop up for me, please. While I do that, I'm going to change what you see on this TV, on this monitor or projector.
Do you want us to put the 10 files in the Dropbox too, or just leave it at the 20 from last week?
Just this stuff from last week is fine.
Okay.
You don't need to do anything this week. We didn't get far enough this week for you guys we didn't get far enough last week. Hopefully that won't be the case again. It took a lot of time for us to get through Smart Objects last week, and that's not in the sort of the general course of events. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was good about that part because it's just too important. And so all the work, again, we'll get through it. We'll be getting through it today as far as the Photoshop stuff goes. Yes, anybody? Okay, we good? All right, so if you start up Photoshop, hopefully your screen is not going to look like mine. To get your screen to look like mine, I want you to come up to the window menu, come down to Workspace, come down to Essentials, and it should have default of it. Look up at my screen if you don't know where I'm at. So again, it's the Photoshop menu at the very top, the window menu, down to Workspace, down to Essentials, default. And when you let go of that, your screen should change somewhat. But resetting or changing workspaces in Photoshop is always a two-step process. So right after you do that, you go right back to the very same place, to Window, down to Workspace, and come down to the bottom third where it says Reset Essentials, and let go of that. This reset button down here, the reset menu item down here, will change depending on whatever workspace you use. So if you were to pick photography, like right now, I want you to go ahead and pick photography because the essential workspace is essentially worthless. Maybe that's why they call it that. So at any rate, go back up to the workspace, down to photography. That's this photography workspace right here. And when you click on that, you'll see that your workspace actually changes. It won't look like mine because I need to reset mine. So again, up to Workspace, down, and you'll see that Reset is now changed from Reset Essentials to Reset Photography because that's the one you picked. And when you do that, you get what they call the workspace, and these are the workspaces in Photoshop. And basically all a workspace is a layout of different palettes. So it's different things that you typically work with. So Photoshop has gone and tried to sort of give you a set of canned workspaces. In our case, I'm going to help you build what I think is arguably, I think it's a much better workspace for people who are learning Photoshop, who are oriented to photography. So we are going to change our workspace and we're going to build our own. It looks like everybody in here has got what they call the application frame on it. This is the application frame. It's this sort of black border. It's basically like a desktop, but it hides everything else. You'll see as you pull it down, it moves all of your palettes and it shows what's all going on behind it. This thing is called the application frame. To turn that on and off, you come up to the window menu, and it's right down here at the bottom. It's this thing called application frame. If you turn it off, you'll see that you still have the palettes, but you can actually see through to whatever programs you have going on behind. I happen to have Safari running behind mine, but again, I personally like the application frame, so I want to leave it on. It's just that if all of a sudden you turn on one of these machines and this is what happens to you, if you can see other programs, your desktop, any of that kind of stuff, it's because this application frame is not turned on. So if you turn that guy on, we're in a good start. So is everybody's screen sort of looking like this? You don't have these little square things over here? Yeah. Then again, go up to the window menu, down to Workspace, down to Reset Photography, and see what happens. Huh. No, we don't. I'm gonna throw mine away. It's actually funny. You've got libraries, you just don't have anything in it. Okay, well, it doesn't matter because, guys, most of the stuff that you see on here we're gonna pitch anyway. Okay, so starting from left to right. Okay, now a lot of you people may have done some work in Photoshop before. I'm going to sort of assume that nobody has got a ton of experience in Photoshop. So if it seems like I'm talking a little bit beneath you, don't worry. I'm going to go so far tonight as to make your head absolutely swim. Right? Isn't that fun? Hey, but we're going to be doing it all like we're working tonight. We're working on images tonight. We're working. There's the I'm trying to get away from the lecture thing as much as I can. Okay. With that being said, before we do anything, we need to check one thing, one important thing, and it's the problem I keep having here with the digital. It's not a problem with the digital lab. The digital lab is moving hell and high water to try and get the art department, and well, that's enough said right there. Art department, just a bunch of losers, right? Hey, if they were winners, they'd be in the photo department. Anyway, some of you are in both, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all right. But wait, is it design you're in?
Yeah.
Then you're one of the team. I love you, man. That's all I can say. No, design people. You know, it's like, okay, painters I'm starting to lose a little faith in, but the design people I adore because I adore good design. But at any rate, wow, got to be careful with this crowd. Okay, all right, so the thing I want you to check is this. The thing I need you to check is this. Go up to the edit menu. Up to the edit menu. Hello. Up to the edit menu. All the way down to color settings. And a dialog box should open up with your color settings. And hopefully this thing does not say North American General Purpose 2. Does yours?
No.
North American Pre-Press.
Oh, okay. Well, the North American Pre-Press people, they're getting halfway there. That's a good thing. For those of you who've got North American General, you need to change that. So click on this drop-down menu, change it from North American General Purpose 2 down to North American Pre-Press. And you'll see if you've done that, the changes that are made is this Adobe RGB in North American General, this is sRGB, which you do not want. We talked about this last week. And also, all of the profile mismatching checkboxes are now activated. So if for some reason you bring in an image that has a profile mismatch in here, you'll get a warning dialog box will come up and it won't let you, it forces you to, if you're gonna ruin your image, it forces you to make that call. Photoshop does not make it for you. Okay, if you've done that, then simply hit OK to get rid of that. And now we're going to begin to actually configure this guy. If you look on the left-hand side, this is what they call the tool palette over here. We will talk about some of the tools tonight, not very many of them, but a few of them. As the course goes on, we get in a lot more into a lot of the tools over here. But we will talk about these guys when we actually got an image up to work on. But this thing stays open on your desktop the whole time. Otherwise, you don't have anything to work with. If you come over to the right side, you will see that there are palettes that are actually open, like the histogram and the navigator. You can actually see, and libraries and adjustments. You can, all of those guys you can actually see. But right to the left of them are little icons, and these little icons, if you click on these, they actually kick out, they open up. So the very top one is the history and action palette. I want you to do a favor. If you click on it once, it opens up. If you click on it a second time, it closes. Click on it to go ahead and open it up, and then if you click on the word history, that's a tab right there. There's two palettes in here. If you click on action, you'll see there's an action palette and a history palette. If you grab the history palette, click on it and pull it off, you can tear it away, which is what I want you to do. Then the action palette, I want you to click and tear it away as well. When you do that, you'll notice that in the top of these palettes now, at the very top left-hand corner, you have a small little X. Adobe is probably going to release the next version of Photoshop with that little X half the size that it is right now because they didn't think this was small enough. Can you believe how small that is? It's like, you got to be kidding me. At any rate, I want you, do not hit the little X on the history palette, but do hit the little X on the actions palette, and what happens is it goes away. Now, if by mistake you clicked on the history one, so go ahead and click on the history one as well. Click on it to get it to go away as well. If you made that by accident, if you did something by accident, you can always get it back by simply going up to the Windows menu and back down, and you want to click on history, and it'll come right back. So all the palettes live under the window. These are all the possible palettes that we've got are sitting right here. So far so good, right? I'm going to go on, and I'm going to go pretty fast. So if something doesn't work for you, if you get lost, holler to me, okay? All right, because I can't keep going. Okay, does everybody have the history? Okay, everybody knows it. Okay, the second little icon that's over there on the side right now, I click on it, and it'll jump out, and you have properties and info. And I want you to do the very same thing. I want you to tear properties off and drag it over to the kind of the left-hand side. We need a little room to move around on this. And then grab the info palette and tear it off as well. However, the info palette is something that we want to keep. We don't look at it a ton in the very beginning of working in Photoshop, but as time goes on, you'll work with it more and more and more. Eventually, if you get into retouching with me, we'll build a different workspace for retouching that keeps the photo palette visible the whole time, the info palette, sorry, the whole time. However, in the beginning part, we need occasional access to it. So instead of leaving it floating out on its own, I want you to drag it on top of the properties palette window. And when you bring it inside, you will see, depending on where you place it, if you bring it up like it is a tab, you will see that you get a solid blue line that goes all the way around the properties palette. If you let go, then info and properties will be docked together as two separate tabs that reside in the very same palette. And then click on properties to make sure it's in the front, because it's the one we will see and use more often than not. The next icon that's over, if you click on it, it'll jump out, and it's called the clone source. You can tear that palette off and hit the X box to close it. The next, now we're actually getting into things that are palettes that have stayed open the whole time. These are no longer icons. If you click on the histogram and drag it out into the workspace, you can close it. Hit its little X arrow. We just got rid of that guy. If you click on the navigator, drag it out into that same space and do the exact same thing. Hit the X and to get rid of it. Yep. If you don't have it, then don't worry about it. Libraries is next. Click and drag libraries out into the info, out into the, the center of your screen, and kill it with the X. The next one is adjustments. Now, for some, go ahead and drag adjustments out. A lot of people actually use adjustments. I don't use adjustments, and the reason that I don't use adjustments is that they're pretty little icons that take up a whole lot of room, and unless you actually click on one, you don't really know what the hell it is. If you hover over it like I'm hovering over right now, that means that that little icon is the exposure adjustment. All of these adjustments are actually found in a second place at the bottom of this layers palette. And that is how everybody in the world, for the most part, works. So if you've been used to using adjustments, don't worry. We're not going to abandon that entirely. Also realize that if the workspace that I'm suggesting that you guys use, if you don't like it and you want to amend it or you want to add something to it, you're welcome to do that. I'm just telling you what I think is going to be the most efficient way for you guys to be working in this. And I also want your space to look like mine, or to look like my screen. So when I go to a certain place on my screen, you guys are going to the exact same place. Okay, so we're going to get rid of adjustments because, again, it's in a different place. It's easier to get to, and it does not take up screen real estate. Screen real estate's a premium. Okay, the last thing we need to do is deal with this layers, channels, and paths right here. And the reason that we need to deal with this is that I need to get stuff up above it, and there's icons that are down here at the bottom that I don't see. You guys may have yours. You guys, on yours, you do see them. The reason I lose mine is that my screen on my laptop is trying to redraw to the projector, and so it chops the bottom of it off, so I can't see it. So in your case, I still want you to go ahead and do this because, again, we need to get some things up above your layers palette. So grab the layers palette, drag it out into the middle, and it should shrink just like mine did. The next thing I do, we're just going to add the channels and the paths right back onto it as if they are tabs for it. So again, grab the channels tab, drag it, bring it on top of the layers palette. And again, you want to bring the tab so that if you bring it too low, it won't dock to it. If you bring it up too high, it won't dock to it. But when you get it pretty much lined up as a tab, you'll see that you get the blue line again that goes all the way around the palette. If you let go, this is now docked together with the layers. And then finally do the exact same thing with paths. Drag it out of its space like this, come back, and then come up again. And when you get the little blue line all the way around, you get paths. And then finally click on the Layers tab to make it active. So this is the beginning of how things are going to look. So we're almost there. Click on the properties, and now what I want you to do is I don't want you to click on the tab. If you click on the tab, it'll actually separate the two again. That's not what I want you to do. What I want you to do is, if you'll notice right above those two tabs is sort of like it's a border that's got the little X on the left-hand side, and it's also got a set of arrows on the right-hand side. If you wanted to collapse this thing to be like those small little icons that we started with, you simply click on these two little arrows and it drops down to become that icon. I don't want you to do that, but I just wanted you to know that that's actually how it was done. So again, I'm going to select the Properties tab, but if you click on the bar that's right between the X and those two little arrows, you can move the entire palette. You move both of the tabs all at once. And what I want you to do is start to bring it up to the top on the right-hand side. And as you start to slowly, when you get close to the right-hand edge, slow down. And as you start to get to the right-hand edge, you'll see that it actually will snap into place. You can push it too far, which I don't want you to do because then you lose the information in it. But instead, come over and do it just as you start to approach it, you'll see that it sort of snaps into place on the right-hand side. It does not snap into place on the top-hand side unless you end up covering up that thing that says photo, and I don't want you to do that. So I just sort of like leave it into place with just a little bit of space right there. The next thing we're going to put, and it's going to be right underneath this Properties palette. Watch my screen when this happens. It's somewhat similar to the docking we did before, but instead of bringing this up on top and docking it into this palette, what I really want to do is connect it to the bottom. So if you bring History, again, I'm grabbing that little space, the border that goes between the X and those two little arrows. I'm bringing it underneath my Properties palette. And then very slowly, as you start to bring it up, you will see that it snaps into place. However, it's not docked yet. You still need to press gently going upward, and then all of a sudden you'll see a single blue line that looks just like my screen. Now when you let go, this is now docked. It's a tab. The two palettes are docked together. They are separate, so you don't have a third tab up here at the top. History did not come up here and join the Properties and the info. It is a separate palette that's sitting underneath the bottom. And to prove that to you, if you come down to the lower right-hand corner of the History palette, if you click and drag this, you'll see that it moves this guy. Well, that's not what I wanted it to do, but at any rate, if you click the very top little border underneath the Properties guy and you pull it away, you'll see that History is now actually moving with it. If you've done that, again, take it back to the right-hand side, gently let it snap into place, bring it up, and we're almost ready to go. I want to get my Pallets property tab slightly less tall. So if you hover on the area where the History palette is connecting to the Properties, you'll see you get a two-headed arrow. If you click on that and drag it slightly up, then you'll get something that looks basically like my screen. So kind of what we're going for here is roughly a third of this space over here I want for Properties and info, a third is going to be for History, and then the final third is going to be here for Layers and Channels. So the final docking that we need to do is this Layers and Channels palette. If you click again on the space between, on that border between the X and the two little arrows, you can move the entire thing, bring it underneath History, sort of bring it up to where they snap into place, and then again, you've got to keep pressing up a little bit higher to get the blue arrow and let go, and you now, all three of these palettes are docked together. And then finally, come over to this area at the very bottom of the Layers palette to get the border at the bottom, to get the double-headed arrow and click and drag slightly down. You don't want to go down too far, because if you go down too far, you end up, every time you go to use one of these little icons down here at the bottom, you will actually invoke the dock, which you don't want to actually do. So is everybody's screen looking something like this? Okay, we're going to save this so that we don't have to do all of that work again. In order to save this, come up to the window menu, down to Workspace, down to New Workspace. Look up at my screen to see where I'm at. So again, Window, Workspace, New Workspace, and we will call this Better Photography instead of just Photography. and go ahead and say, okay, to save this. And now what you will see whenever you come back, although I don't think it gets remembered on these machines, but I'll show you how to actually, before this class is over, I'll show you how to go. There's a file now on the desktop that we can find, and you guys can copy it to your hard drive, or we'll actually copy it onto the class partition. That might be a simpler place. But if you guys want to use this on your own machine, you can load this on your own machine, and instead of having to do all the work that we just did, it'll just pop up just like this. But you'll notice now, if you do the window drop down, window down to workspace, you'll see that better photography is now one of the options that you've got. Essentially what you have here in this drop down menu is all the workspaces that are here in the middle are the ones that, that Adobe ships by default. The ones up here, these are all custom workspaces of mine. So for instance, I have a retouching workspace for my MacBook. I have another one for my NEC monitor at home. I have a different version of that. I've also got one for this projector right here, and so on and so forth. Make sense? If you've made a workspace that you don't like any longer, just you go ahead and load the workspace, and then you come down here to delete workspace, and it'll get rid of it for you. But other than that, we should be good to go. Is everybody good on this one? Alrighty then. We are going to start off actually working in Photoshop with something completely different. I want to show you guys a tool in Photoshop before we actually bring in a file in there. So to do that, we need to actually start with a brand new file. So the easiest way to do a new file is to hit the Command and the N key. That stands for Command New. If you can't remember that, simply come up to the File menu down to New, and again, you'll get the very same dialog box will open up. Now, in my case, my dialog box may look different than yours. So let me see what one of your alls looks like really quickly. You are in inches, you are RGB. Okay, not too bad, not too bad. A number of things to actually have set in here. This drop-down menu on the side allows you to build. So all we're really going to build is a blank file in Photoshop. This lets you do it in pixels, inches, centimeters, millimeters, points, picas, or columns. In my case, I want you to have inches in there. If you click on the width, and I simply clicked and drug through the number to make it active, then you can hit an 8. We're going to go ahead and just make an 8 by 10. So hit 8 and hit the Tab key will run you to the very next possible place to enter a value. Go ahead and put 10 in there. Hit the Tab key again. Let's put in 300. This is actually be meaning that we are going to build an image that's got 300 pixels per inch. That'll be 8 inches tall, 10 inches wide. Then in terms of the color mode, you want this to be RGB. You have to set that using the drop-down menu. We also want this to be an 8-bit. The background contents we want to be in white. If you click on the drop-down menu here, you'll see that you can actually create all sorts of different color backgrounds. You can do, white is now an option that I've got. You've got background color. You could make it transparent. You can click on Other, which will bring open the color picker. If you've done that, just hit Cancel. You can do the same thing. You can get to the color picker by clicking just on the little white guy. It'll do the exact same thing and let you pick a color background. But in our case, I want it to be white. The color profile in this, we do want to be Adobe RGB, and square pixels should be in there by default, and you can simply say OK. And it will open up the file in your desk, and it should look like this. It will be listed as untitled, which is fine. That's exactly the way we want it. And we're good to go, and you're good to learn. Again, for those of you who've worked in Photoshop, I'm really not talking down to you. For those of you who've never been in here, we're going to actually do our very first tool right now. And the first tool we're going to use is actually the brush tool. And the reason I start with the brush tool is it's something that we use in virtually every stage of Photoshop. It's used for a myriad of things. So I just want to go ahead and get you guys familiar with it right in the very beginning. I am not, and I may have told you this already, guys, I'm not a huge keyboard shortcut person. There are several ones that I use. One of them that I do use is to get to the brush key. It's simply the B key. If you simply hit the letter B for brush, it will select this thing right down. It's not quite in the middle of the tool palette over here, but you'll see that this little icon right here is slightly darker than the rest. that slight bit of darkening is Photoshop's indication that you've picked that tool. So you can see as I pick any of these other tools, it's supposed to look like a button that has been pressed in. I don't think it really does, but that's what they say. But anyway, it's this guy right here. It's the B key. However, there are a lot of tools like the brush key actually have multiple tools that you need to be aware of. So if you see a tool that has got one of these little triangles, okay, now that little triangle is ridiculous. The little triangle in the lower right-hand corner, that could not be made smaller and still be visible. Am I right? Not even remotely possible, could not be made smaller. Just wait for Adobe 2017, they'll make it invisible. All right, so anyway, if you click your mouse on that and hold it, you will see all the possible tools that can be picked in this. And the reason I bring this up is that if you select one of these other tools and simply hit the B key, so for instance, if you do the drop-down menu and come down and select the pencil tool, now when you hit the B key, you will get the pencil, which is not what I want. I want the brush. So again, click on that little drop-down arrow, make sure it is the brush tool that you've actually selected. Is everybody good on this? You just click and hold.
Oh, okay.
That's all right. Okay, so you click and hold. If you look up at the top of your application frame now, you will see that you get options. Everybody look up at my screen here. Stay with me, guys. At your screen up here, this thing up here, all the options up here change depending on the tool that you pick. Are we good, guys? Okay, focus. Okay, so you'll notice this. If you go to the very top thing, that thing that's got it's an arrow going in all four directions, that's actually the move tool. If you hover over any tool with your mouse and don't move it, for a brief period of time, it will not only tell you what the tool is, it says move tool, it will also give you the keyboard shortcut for it. So the move tool keyboard shortcut is the V. The only reason I want you to look up at my screen, do not do this, just look up at my screen right now. I'm gonna click the move tool. And what I want you to notice is that this toolbar across this top changes. This thing is specific to the tool that you pick. So when you click on the move tool, all the tool settings up here for the brush thing go away, and you get a different series of options that you use to configure the move tool. So again, I'm hitting the B key to go back to the brush tool. You'll see that there's changes that have been made right here. We need to look at these changes really quickly. The first one is this, and it's the one, it'll have a little number right here. Your number may be different than mine. Mine's got a 400 in here. That 400 stands for the size of your brush. This is the size in pixels. If you click this little double-headed arrow that drops down, you get a drop-down menu that allows you to configure your brushes. I need everybody to click that so that they get this drop-down menu. There's only a couple of things that we're going to use in this menu, but I need everybody to go ahead and click to get their drop-down menu. If you're working on your laptop, that's fine. If you're working on that guy, which one?
I got both.
Okay, that's fine. In this drop-down menu, you will see that, again, the 400 that showed up in mine is this pixel value right here. This is the size of your brush. If you click and drag this little thing, it makes your brush larger or smaller. To get an idea of how large or small it is, just bring your brush over onto your screen. This is what a 90 pixel brush looks like on my screen. If I drag it up to 200, you'll see that this brush is now bigger. If you drag it up to 400, which is where mine was before, if you can't get there, you can actually type in 400, PX stands for pixels, then you will have a 400 pixel brush. At any rate, so that will give you that brush. The only other thing that you've got here that we really want to talk about at this stage of the game is the hardness of your brush. And we're going to look at the difference in those two in just 1 second. The hardness of your brush has to do with the edge quality of your brush. So I need everybody to drag their hardness all the way up to 100%. This is going to give you a 100% hard brush. And then finally, we need to get rid of this menu, this drop-down menu. But if you click on your image to do it, it will actually paint on your image. I don't want that to happen. So to keep that from happening, you simply click in this area that's right next to Adobe Photoshop. Just anywhere up on this options toolbar. If you click up here, the fly down menu will go away and you won't have painted on your image. Then finally, we need to paint with a color we can see. In my case right now, you always end up, whatever your foreground color is the color you always end up painting with. In my case, my foreground color is white. Yours may be white or black. A lot of them are black. To get to what Photoshop considers to be the default foreground and background colors, which is black and white, you simply hit the D key. The D stands for default. If you cannot remember that, you see this little black and white icon that sits right above the big version of this? That little black and white icon will do the exact same thing. If you click on that, it returns these two things to those default colors. If you want to flip these colors, if you want white to be your foreground and black to be your background, you hit the X key. Now, what I mean by foreground and background, you will see that the color on the left, that's higher up on the left, appears to be in front of the one that's on the lower right-hand side. That's to indicate that the one that's on this one right here is the foreground color. It is in front. This one right here is the background color. It is behind this. So the X key, repeatedly hitting that, will actually just flip those two no matter what, or whatever is your foreground and background color. It will flip those two. If you cannot remember the X key, this little double-headed arrow does the exact same thing. If you click on this little double-headed arrow, it will also flip those foreground colors back and forth. So finally, I want you to get black as your foreground color so that we can paint with black. Then I want you to come over on top of your image, and I want you to simply click once, and you will see that you actually put a mark on your image. This is what a hard-edged brush actually looks like. Brushes are always, well, they're not always round. You can actually make all sorts of shapes and sizes, different sizes of brushes, but by default, the standard ones that everybody starts out with are round. If you click and drag, you will actually paint a line or a swatch of colors that looks something like this. If you come to that drop-down menu again, and again, up here at the top, the one that's got the number on it, and you click on that drop-down menu, and you change your hardness now from 100% hard edge to 0% hard edge, and then again, click outside. I always click in an area up near the Adobe Photoshop name so that I don't paint anything on here to get rid of this drop-down menu. So up here, clicking again. Now when you click once, this is what a soft edge brush looks like. And you can easily see the difference in these two. This is what we consider to be a soft edge. If you click and drag this across, you will also see that we get a soft edge line. A number of things you will also notice is this. In your history palette, you should have 4 history states right now. They sit right here. Actually, you've got 5 history states. New was when you made your new file, the one that's at the very top. This was your first brush stroke right here. This is your second one. This first one was the dot. The second stroke right here was this. The third stroke down here was the soft dot. And the fourth stroke down here is the line we just drew. If you hit Command Z, the Command key is the one that's right next to the space bar, just to its left. If you hold that key down and hit Z, it undoes your last history state. And you will see that that soft line disappeared, but also one of your history states disappeared. If you hit Command Z again, it comes back. Command Z always undoes only your last move. So when we did Command Z to get rid of the line, what the next Command Z does is bring the line back because our last move was to get rid of it. If we are undoing getting rid of it, it comes back. You can also do this by clicking on a history state. So if you come over to your history palette and you click on the brush tool that's just above that, it goes away. If you click on the next brush tool, the next one goes away. If you come all the way back down to the bottom of your history palette and you click on the bottom brush tool, all of those come back. Does that make sense? If you can't remember any of that, well, this is the easy thing to remember, but I want to add one more keystroke to this. If you hold down the Command key and you add the Option key and then hit the letter Z, you will continue to go back in history all the way back to the beginning, which is what I want you to do. Hold down the Command and the Option key. The Command key is the one just to the left of the space bar. Adding the Option key, which is just to the left of it, allows you to go back in space, go back in time repeatedly. And it'll go all the way back to, again, we set up 50 history states. That was set up in our preferences when we did preferences last week. You have, when you do this, guys, you'll have, what will happen is you'll end up with 50 history states. But guys, this is important. This is important. I need everybody to pay attention. This is important. If we did 51 steps, what ends up happening is the oldest one. So let's say we just kept doing brush strokes. At the 51st step, this history state right here, the oldest one, would go away. If we did another step, 52nd, this one would go away, and so on. So what ends up happening is that as you continue to do work in Photoshop, you only keep 50 states in history unless you change that in preferences. So your oldest ones go away with each new step. So it remembers the 50 most current ones that you've done. The 50 of the newest, that's what it'll remember. Using the Command Option Z will not get you any further back than the history states will. Are there questions about this? Okay, this next part, and it's the last part we're gonna deal with here, is opacity and flow. So does anybody in this room have any idea what opacity means?
Solid, it's not a hue, but it's like, it's not opaque.
It's strength is maybe a good way of putting it. It'll be the strength of the color, right? Or the strength of the stroke. So we're going to see how this works because it's different than flow. So you have an idea of what opacity is. Who can tell me what flow is?
So when you move the brush, how it moves?
We're going to look at both of those right now because these things are really important. Most people, when they start working in Photoshop in the beginning, work with opacity. Once you get really good, most people give up on opacity and only work with flow. I'm going to show you what those two things are. One's a little bit on training wheels and the other one isn't. So to do that, we are going to change the opacity. To change the opacity, again, let's go back to a hard brush. So go ahead and click on this menu right here. Let's look at this one last thing before we do it. If you click and drag this brush into the middle, come up and actually bring it up into 50%. Well, I take it back. Leave it at 0% really quick. Zero hardness. Click out up by the Adobe Photoshop and just do a quick line across. So that's a 0% hardness. If you click on the drop-down menu again and drag your hardness up to 50%, and again, click outside of that, then do a 50% hard brush, and then finally click and drag it all the way up to 100%. And again, click out and do 100%. You can see that you can control the edge quality of your brush. And you can control it in any of those hardnesses. It doesn't have to be 0, 50, and 100. It can be 73% hardness. It can be 22% hardness, 14% hardness. It can be any of those guys in between. If you've done these 3 strokes, I want to get rid of these 3 strokes. So hold down the Command Option and hit Z 3 times. It gets rid of those guys. So finally, come back up. We're going to do 100% hard brush, which I do have right now, 100% hard brush. Again, I'm going to click out of this. And at the very top, I'm going to click and drag a line across. That is 100% opacity. If you then click on this opacity slider, I want you to look up at my screen really quick. There's a number of different ways that you can change this opacity. The first way you can change it is to simply click on this little drop-down arrow on the side. You will get a drop-down little arrow underneath this, and you can drag that arrow back to 50%. And that's one way to get 50%. If you click and get the drop-down menu again and drag it all the way back up to 100%, and then again, click outside of it, you will keep it at 100%. You can drag across this, or you can actually double-click on the value that's in here and type in 50% again. You would type in 50 and hit your return key or the enter key, and that will enter a value of 50%. Again, if you click and drag across this and type in 100%, or type in anything, you can type in anything between 1% or 0. I don't know if you can do 0%. Let's find out. I don't know if it'll take 0%. It changes it to 1, and it tells you it's got to be between 1 and 100. So at any rate, that's this. Was that a yell out there? Oh, that's all right. The last way to do it is to, and it's the way I usually do it, is if you hold your mouse right over the word opacity, you get this hand that's got an arrow pointing in 2 different directions. This is called a scrubby slider, and this thing appears all over Photoshop. If you click, now you can actually simply drag in one direction. As you go to the right, the numbers go up. If you go down, the numbers go down. So at any rate, I want you guys to put in 50% or, really close. I want you to put in 50%. And then I want you to come over again to your guy right down here, and I want you to click and drag across. And you'll see that now what's happening is that instead of painting with black, we are painting with 50% of black, which is middle gray. If you've done that, hit Command-Z to undo it, because I want to show you something that is unique. This is going to explain the difference in well, I'm going to do one other first. Go ahead and draw that line one more time again. Just drag it across. And then I want you to click your opacity slider and drop it down to 10%. And then I want you to paint a 10% line. And you'll see that as you're going, the strength of this just keeps dropping down and down and down and down and down. However, I want you, if you've done this, all 3 of these guys, hit Command-Z, just get rid of one of them. Just get rid of that 10% guy. Now what I want you to do is this. Click and drag across, but continue to hold your mouse down. Do not let go. And then just drag back. And keep going back and forth. And what you'll basically see is you're not adding any additional density to the initial stroke that you made. You may be adding a little bit around the edges because depending on how good you are with your mouse. But if you can stay inside that line, you'll see that you're not adding any density at all, no matter how long we go back and forth. If, however, you let go of your mouse and then start again, you start to build density. So we started out with 10%. Now we've just added another 10% to this. But again, as you continue to go back and forth, you don't end up building any additional. To build additional, you've got to let go of your mouse again, click and drag again, and this is how you build up. And again, click and drag again, click and drag again, click and drag again, click and drag again, and eventually you will start building up to this. However, a lot of you are saying, well, if I do that 10 times, I should be at black. Every single time I do this, I should be getting another 10%. And that's not how it works. This is why you will keep doing this forever and not build eventually up to black. And it looks like this. So when you start with black, and our black there, it's a 0, 0, 0 in RGB. Remember we did this last week. You guys all remember your color theory stuff from last week, right? So it was exactly what we said. It was an R of 0, a G of 0, and a B of 0. So we start with our 10% opacity. And what it actually does is it literally puts down a 10% gray. When you do the second stroke, what it does is it looks at the difference between 10 and 100%. And the difference in these two is 90. 10% of 90 is 9. So your second stroke here gives you an opacity of 19%. 19, again, to 20, up to 100. The difference in there is 21. 10% of 21 is, or a tenth of 21, I'm sorry, not 21, 81. So the difference in here and here is 81, so it's going to add 8 here. So my next stroke on this ends up being 27. So you'll see it's not a 10, 20, 30. As you continue to do this, it only is adding 10% of the difference between where you're at and 100%. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So does it ever get to like total?
If you keep doing this, theoretically, mathematically, no. But eventually you'll start reading as 0, 0, 0. So that's how opacity works. Are there questions about this? So if you've done all that, you will see now that you got a whole bunch of spaces here in a whole bunch of places here in your history palette. Your history palette has a scroll bar next to it. If you click that scroll bar and come all the way up to the top, we can click on the new history state, which is when we simply built this file. And you'll see all your brush strokes go away. So the next thing we're going to look at is flow, and we're going to look at the difference. So again, I want you to drag your opacity now all the way up to 100%. And instead, we're going to drag flow down to 10%. And now I want you to do the exact same thing. If you start to drag and come across, it does exactly the same thing we did before, albeit a little bit choppier. But you'll see as you start to travel back without lifting your mouse at all, that this thing starts to build density, and it does it much faster. Flow is opacity with time added. So you never have to keep tapping your mouse button, but over a period of time, that will start to build, and it builds much faster than opacity does. And it's why people eventually graduate to doing this. But I'm going to strongly suggest you guys do not work with flow here in the very beginning. This will take off on you so fast, and then you'll just get frustrated, and you won't feel like you've got control over Photoshop. Does this make sense? Okay. So let's actually work with a file. You can close this thing up. You don't need to say, you do not have to save it. You need to find that file I asked you to copy to your desktop. And it's the one inside this folder that says capture 201000702. What does this tell you guys when you look at this? Do you get any indication from this name, anything about these files? What can you tell from it? The 2nd of July. Exactly. Typically you guys would not necessarily know it's Carson's, but I've told you the CAR is Carson's. But you would have your own nomenclature that you guys would use for your own stuff, your own clients or yourself or your projects or whatever. But also, kind of what's the subject matter? Fashion, right? All of that, you guys can tell. You've never seen this file before in your lives, and you can tell that from looking at this. Why on earth the powers to be don't understand the value of that naming convention, I will never know. But the other beauty of this is that when you see my all of my hard drives that store all of my shootings, everything is in perfect chronological order. It never varies. And when I need to get to the last thing that I've done, where is it? It's always at the bottom of the list. I never go looking for it. It's always placed right there. I just scroll to the bottom of the list, and it's always right there. So it's just an incredibly good, superior way of actually doing this. Now, some of you who've actually opened up the first one, I don't want you to open up the first one. I need you to open up both of these at the same time. So I want you, there's 4 files in here. Can anybody tell me what these 4 files are? Just by looking at them.
Raw files and then
There's a raw file, and then what's this XMP? It's the data about how this file was processed. So this is a really important thing to know about raw file, and it's why raw files are so powerful. But it's also there is an issue with raw files. When Adobe very first came out with the raw file format. Oh, by the way, how many people in here actually subscribe to Adobe? You pay for your Photoshop, right? And you pay your $9 a month, right? And you hate those fuckers for making you do that every single month, right? Every single raw file in the world, every single one that you've ever shot, every single one that you probably ever do shoot, is all simply a variation on a TIFF file. It is all licensed by Adobe, and every single one you shoot, Adobe gets a fee for every single one you shoot. Does that suck? I hate those fuckers. They have got more money than God, and they have to keep bleeding people like you dry. You know, I understand bleeding the people who've got money, but how many people in here have got money seriously, right? Okay, I'm just saying, right? You're all probably up to your eyeballs in student debt, and that $9 you could drink, at least tonight, instead, right? Just saying, you know, a little something for the students here, a little empathy, right? You'll have them sucked in when they graduate. They won't be able to do anything else except use your lousy program, and then you'll really gouge them. Anyway, just saying. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so, but this is the thing about that, is that, so they came out with a raw format, And it was a great thing. Digital was a great thing, but all the law enforcement people said we can't use it. And the reason we can't use it is that because clearly you guys can go in, you can create anything. You can put my picture. I mean, we've all seen Forrest Gump. You can put I can be standing on the podium with John Kennedy. Everybody can fake this shit, right? So let me ask you this. How many people in this can name a raw file editor, an editor that will allow you to go in and edit the raw file? How many people can name any program that will do that? I'm sorry, what? Lightroom. Okay, anything else? Photoshop, anything else? Capture One, anything else? There's a gazillion processors out there. There's one called Bibble. There's a one called RGB. There's a DxO makes one, all of them. However, none of them will allow you to edit a raw file. They will allow you to process that raw file, but you cannot edit it by law. And the reason this is that because Photoshop said to all the crime people, hey, if we lock the raw file format down to the point that there is no program on earth that will let you go in and get at that thing. If we lock it down that much, then you have to trust us that if you can get your hands on the raw file, it will be legitimate. It will be genuine. Nobody can go in there and change it. We make you that promise. And law enforcement took the bait and said, fine, okay. So that being said, you can't edit a raw file. You can process it 1,000 times, but you cannot go in and edit it. Your processing instructions are kept in a separate file because, again, you cannot change this CR2 file. That CR2 file was created when I snapped the shutter. There's nothing I can do to change that. So when I want to process it, when I want to change its color, when I want to change its exposure, when I want to do any of those things, it has to write a separate file that's got those processing instructions in it. It actually writes a separate one for that. And it is kept separate. If you lose this separate file, you simply lose your processing instructions. Does this make sense, what's going on here? This is the only advantage that I can say that DNG has over a regular raw file. How many people in this room know what a DNG is? How many don't? DNG stands for digital negative. It's Adobe's digital negative format. And what Photoshop said that they would do is to get rid of this problem. Basically what they do to create a DNG is they create a folder that puts your raw file into it and then adds this XMP into it. You see it as only one file, but the truth of the matter is it's still a raw file with all of your XMP settings that appears to be one. Does that make sense? There's other things that Adobe has promised to do with it. It is an open format. Everybody else's, the CR2 is a Canon file, is a closed format. Nobody else can work with it. NEF is Nikon's closed format. Nobody can work with that. Adobe's DNG, in theory, anybody can use. So Canon could start shooting. There are Hasselblad cameras now that shoot in DNG format. There are Phase 1 cameras now that shoot to a DNG format. So there are certain people that are actually embracing that, but that's just sort of what it is. Personally, I don't really believe in using the DNG format, and I'll tell you why right now. In the older days of medium format phase stuff especially, there's this thing called a secret header in a file when it gets processed. That secret header is where they keep the secret sauce. It's why Phase 1, for anybody who's ever done any work in Capture One, the skin tones in Capture One blow Photoshop out of the water. Nobody I know who's really serious in doing fashion and beauty work would ever consider processing a file in Camera Raw or in Lightroom if they had to. Everybody does it in C1 Pro because they have this special whatever that they don't tell anybody what it is. That special whatever is put into a thing called a hidden header, and they're the only people. DNG can copy that information, but it doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know how to use it. So it may as well not have it. Anyway, it really fucked up a whole lot of, again, medium format files. If you convert them to DNG, you end up with a piece of garbage that will take you forever to try to fix. So at any rate, if you want to use it, do so at your own peril. Anyway, I'm not a big believer in it. However, back to this. I need you to select both of these files. To select both of these files, you could hold down the Shift key. So select the very top one, hold down the Shift key, and select the one that's in the middle. And you'll notice when you do that, you actually you end up selecting the XMP file in between. That's not what I really want to do. So I'm going to click out of that altogether. I'm going to select the top one again. Then if you hold down the Command key, again, that's the key just to the left of the space bar. you can cherry pick anything that you want, and you can just get those two files. If you do that, then I want you to drag these two files on top of Photoshop, and you should come into Camera Raw. And hopefully your files do not look correct. You should have two of them in here. You'll see they're both on this side over here. If anybody doesn't have these two, sing out right now. Okay, so we've got both of these files going on here. This is something I want to show you guys in terms of talking about color correction, how we use this card, the card that I keep showing you. I've showed you this at every single meeting we've had. This is our third meeting, right? I've showed you this thing all 3 meetings, right? I'm going to probably show it to you every 15. That's how important this thing is. At any rate, this is the thing that you use to do your color correction. But what I wanted to also show you is that you don't have to have this card in every single frame that you actually shoot. You have it in a reference frame that you can then take what it does for you in this reference frame and apply it to the frames that you actually want to work on. Make sense? So we are going to use this guy. We are in, and we're going to go through Camera Raw really quickly. How many people are completely familiar with the Camera Raw workspace or the idea of it? How many people are really comfortable with the Develop module in Lightroom? How many are not? All right, well then we're going to go, this will go pretty quick then. Okay, so we're going to start. In order to color balance this first, it's this set of tools up at the top. At the very top here we have the magnifying glass, the hand, which will move stuff. The next one over, the third one over, is the white balance tool. If you click on that white balance tool and come over, again, you don't want to click on a spot that's too hot, and I'll show you what happens when you do that. What we need to do is find something that should be neutral. And I've already told you that the patches along the bottom of this card should be neutral. Is there anything else in this image that should be neutral, Gray? The wall? What else? The sweater, probably not. But that, it's a good guess. When you're looking at it right now, it's pretty screwed up, right? Okay, but you can find out. I'm going to actually say, let's click on the sweater. And if you click on that, you'll see that, well, actually that does. It neutralizes the sweater out, and that actually may be a good neutral gray. However, if I use this card, I know for certain that it is neutral gray. The patch that I use on the card that I always pick is the one that's right next to the red patch. You don't want to use something that's too light, and you don't want to use something that's too dark. So I'm going to click on that patch right there, and you'll see that your sweater was actually very close. So I was wrong about that. The sweater was a good one to pick. However, if you click on the shirt, you'll see that it, because the shirt is blue, it's trying to neutralize that blue, so it's pumping in a whole bunch of yellow, which may not necessarily be wrong. You may like really, really warm film, and so this would be your ticket, how to go about that. However, if you click back here, let's talk about other things in this image that could possibly be neutral. What else in here is neutral gray? The building. Someone said the building. Click on the building and see if things change. They don't. Click on a weird color on the color chart. I want you to click on a weird color. Click like on the purple color to pervert the color. It's now, the color's now wrong. Now click on the building and you'll see that it neutralizes it out. Click on the purple color again, or click on the red color. Just click on any color to make it, give it a really strong color cast. The ironwork that's down along the bottom is a neutral gray. That will also neutralize you out. Click on another color to pervert. I'm going to click on the green right now. The guy's tennis shoes, if you click on the tennis shoes, in theory, all of these are white colors or gray colors that should be neutral. This guy's pants should be neutral. His shoes should be neutral. The sidewalk is probably somewhat neutral. All of these colors, so if you do not have a color card and you want to do color correction, you look for stuff in your scene that should be somewhat neutral. Is this working for everybody? So other things that are neutral. What in this room, if I shot a picture of this room, could I neutralize on? Well, a lot of people say the walls. I don't really know what color the walls are, but how do you feel about the edge of this picture? I think that's probably neutral, as is the edge of this picture right here. How about the no, the type, that big white type that's in the no food and drink allowed in here? Wait just a second, let me take a sip of water. Come on, that was funny. The whiteboard here, probably a neutral color. There's a million neutral colors in your life that you can actually use. All right, so that's going to be starting the whole process. However, that neutralizes the color out. I'm actually going to go back to the patch that's on my color card, and you'll see small changes in this will actually shift your color, and it depends on what you really, how specific you want to be, but using the color checker will give you true neutral color. Yeah.
Which one to pick? There are two.
The two that are in the middle right here.
Yeah.
These two guys right here. I always go for the one that's a little bit darker, and this is why. I want you to try, look at this guy's arm. Don't you think that that's actually a white? Where it's burnt out, the highlight. I want you to click on that. And click on it again if you don't get the first one, and you'll see this error message that comes up. And it says that the area that you're clicking on is too bright to set the white balance. You need to find something that is less bright. A lot of times using the color picker, picking the whitest of the colors in the color picker, picking this guy up here. Now, it's not the case of this particular image, but a lot of times this guy up here, you will get this error message. So you need to use one of these two guys right down here. The reason you don't use colors down here in the bottom is that color casts show up in the highlights and the quarter tones. They don't show up in deep shadows. Like for instance, if I pervert this color right here, I'm gonna put a lot of green in it. Can you really tell in this shadow right here, in this shadow, that there's a bunch of blue in this? You don't see that at all, but you certainly pick it up in the highlights. You see it all in the highlights of her shirt. You see it here, but you don't get it. You don't really see it in these pants. You don't, I mean, maybe a little bit, but color casting shows up in the highlights, and that's why you pick these lighter colors. So at any rate, I've got that color balance. Then to apply this to the image that I actually want to work with, you come up to this thing that says film strip right up here. You click on this guy and you do select all. Look up at my menu and see where I'm at right now. These are going to change the minute I do select all. You'll see there's some grayed out things here, but if you do select all, it will actually pick this second image for you. And then if you go right back up to that same drop-down menu, you can see that sync settings is now available to you. If you click on sync settings, it will actually then synchronize all of this stuff for you. And you'll see you can have different settings that you actually synchronize. All right, I'm going right back, So up to the film strip, down to select all, right? Now both of your images are selected. Back to the very same drop-down menu, down to sync settings. It's right in the middle. And then right back again. Go ahead and do so, and you want to sync it all. Yeah. All right, when you do that, this dialog box will come up. These are all the possible things that you could sync are right here. You'll see that there's a drop-down menu, and the very top one is everything. The next one is settings. All these different things in here are just different series of these check boxes. Which ones are checked, which ones aren't. You can actually go in and check these things yourself one at a time, or you could simply say everything, because all we've done on this is change the color balance and say okay. And then you will see that that second image now, that the white balance that we used in the beginning in the exact same light, the exact same situation that this next file is in, got applied to the second one. And now if you click on the second one, you will actually see that indeed it is color balanced. You need to have the one that is color balanced up first. So everybody look at this screen over here really quick. That's good. So you just color balance this first one now up to the film strip, down to select all. Select all. And because this one is visible, it's going to apply this settings to this image. And you can have 1,000 images there. You can have all of them, and it would do the same thing to all of them. And now you'll see the second one is colored correctly. Are there questions about this? Are we good on this? Okay, I want you to notice something really quickly here. What color temperature do we have in this file? Yeah, I have 4,550, and I've actually got a +7 in my tint. So I'm just going to write those numbers right up here, 4,550. Yours may not be exact, but it should be very close. And a +6. And I want you to simply say done now. Do not go ahead and change. Don't go ahead and open this. Just hit done. And then I want you to go back and I want you to find where that is on your desktop. And you will see, again, it doesn't look like anything has changed. These things all look the same. However, if you look at the XMP data file underneath this guy, if you double click on this guy, let's see what it tries to open up. It's going to try and open up in numbers. You don't want this thing to open up in numbers. Go ahead and quit numbers. Instead, close whatever it opened in. We're going to open it in something that we can read it in. If you then hold down the control key on your keyboard and click and hold the mouse down on this, you will get a drop-down menu, and you want to say open with, and it's building the possible applications that it can open with right now. And you want to come down to text edit. So did everybody get that? And this is going to open up in a text editor, and you will see this is the recipe about how you want to bake your file. So all this information up at the top seems like it's like, Jesus Christ, Mercer, I'm never going to get through all this. What is all this? This is actually all stuff from your camera at the very top. This is the metadata. This is what's inside of this file. As you start to scroll down, though, you will actually see right down here that in mine, look at my screen if you can't see it on yours right here, but in my screen right here, I've got color temperature at 4,500 degrees Kelvin. It's right here. This text file is built using Camera Raw. Does that make sense? Now, we can try to get tricky. Anyway, let's not get tricky here. I'm just trying to show you guys what this is. Finally, go ahead and close that out. The next thing I want you to do is you can simply open up the bottom file, the one that we did, because all of those settings are remembered. So if you just open this guy up, all the color balance was still remembered, and it will come open like this. However, did we talk last week about enabling lens profile correction and removing chromatic aberration? Did we go down that road? How many people know that? Okay, because you should have done it in Lightroom, right? And you should have reset it as your default in Lightroom. Has everybody done that? Well, we're going to do it here, and this is how you do it. Before we do anything, now we have not touched anything. We have not reset color balance since we opened this. We haven't changed any of the exposure. We haven't touched contrast. We haven't touched anything in here. We simply opened this file. If you change anything, no matter what it is you change, and you do what we're going to do right now, it will become the standard, the default for your Camera Raw. And you don't want that to happen. You don't want to make, say, a third of a stop exposure adjustment in here and then make a new default. Because if you do that, every single time you open a raw file in Camera Raw, it will bump your exposure up a third of a stop. You don't want to do that. But there is stuff that Adobe does not turn on by default that we do want to be the default. And it's only two things, and it happens right here. If you look up at the icons that run across the top up here, these are the things up here that should be familiar to you in Lightroom. This is the basic panel where you actually get all of exposure, color, temperature. If you click on the next one over, this is curves, which you also have in Lightroom. The next one over, this is where you have detail. Again, this is input sharpening, noise reduction. You also have this in Lightroom. The next one over, convert to grayscale, hue, saturation, lightness. You have all of these in Lightroom. The next one over is split toning. You also have that in Lightroom. The next one over is, it's supposed to look like a lens. And in your case, if you click on, there's a tab under here, there's either manual or profile. If you click on profile, I'm guessing that these two checkboxes are not checked on your all's machines, right? They are or they're not? They are. Oh my God, they're actually trying to get these machines fixed for us. By default, Photoshop does not enable these things. So to show you how this will work, if you uncheck the one that says enable profile correction, you'll see that your image, especially near the edges, actually moves. What's going on here is that most lenses have distortions in them. They have one of two kinds of distortion. They either have barrel distortion in them, which means the center of the image appears to be protruding out towards you. It's supposed to look as if you've wrapped your image around a barrel. So the edges seem to be recessed deeper in, and the front appears to be sticking more out to you. That's barrel distortion because it's supposed to be like a barrel. The opposite of that is called pin cushioning, and in pin cushioning, it looks like the center is actually being pressed in the way it would look as if you had actually taken a pin cushion or a sponge or something and pressed against the middle. Then in that case, the middle seems to be further away from you in the screen and the edges seem closer. They build profiles for lenses. You will see that there's the lens that this was shot at is actually entered right into this right here. This information gets picked up from the metadata, and at any rate, Adobe has done a whole bunch of work to actually fix this. You'll also see there's a vignetting issue in a lot of issues, a lot of lenses that it'll also fix. At any rate, also removing chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration happens in really, really, really super fine detail, very contrasty detail at that's blown up at like 400%. I will show you chromatic aberration later on. Just suffice it to say, you want this enabled. These two things are the only two things, and I'm bringing this up because if you guys haven't done this on your machines at home, you've got to do this now. These are the only two changes we've made. We have not made any other change on here because, again, if you make any other change, it's going to become your new default. To get this then to be your new default, you go to this drop-down menu all the way on the left-hand side. Look up at my screen to see what I'm talking about. It's this little menu right here. If you click and you look down here, you will see down here at the bottom, you can save new camera raw defaults. And if you click on that, this now will be enabled. When you first open up a file into Camera Raw, you will not have to come in here and do this. This will already be turned on. If you didn't listen to what I said and you really fucked this up and screw it up and you actually had changed the exposure and now all of your files, when you open them up, that's getting all screwed up, you can get back to Photoshop's original ones by simply coming up here, again, that same drop-down menu, and come down here and do Reset Camera Raw Defaults. And you just watch my screen. Don't do this, but watch my screen. When I actually do the reset on that, you'll see that it turns both of these guys off again. So I'm going to turn them both on again. I am going to save new camera raw defaults, and we are good to go. Questions about this?
You're not saying that every single photo we open is going to automatically do the lens correction?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
Wouldn't you want that to be the case?
Yeah, well, it doesn't stretch it just a little bit.
No, it corrects it. It undoes the damage the lens has done to it. This is a mistake in the lens.
Yeah.
This is correcting it. So it's not stretching it, it's fixing it. It's fixing something that's wrong. Okay, back to the general panel up here really quick. So since you guys all know how to work in this, what would you do next for this file? Come on, all you people who know how to do all that developing shit in Lightroom, what would you do?
Exposure and contrast.
So is it better to edit in this?
Yes, it is definitely better edit in this. This is a great question. We're going to bring this file into Photoshop once we get through here a little bit. But right now, this raw data has not been processed. Every single piece of information my camera gave me is available to me. This actually is not in 8-bit. This is actually in a much, much deeper bit depth. And if you don't know what bit depth is, don't worry about it. We'll talk about that later. But nonetheless, everything my camera could give me, I have got in my hands right now that I can develop. And I can redevelop it over and over and over again. Once I bring this into Photoshop, that file is somewhat baked. And although I can push things, if I don't have to push them too far, I can do it there. But if I have to do really serious hardcore edits, I can't do it in Photoshop like I can do it in RAW. So you want to do the heavy lifting right here. So what do? What do? You look at it and you go, well, okay, the color's wrong. Well, it isn't wrong. We've neutralized it. Well, the exposure wrong. Well, the exposure isn't wrong because I actually used that card to determine perfect exposure. So don't fuck up my file by changing either the color or the exposure. But that doesn't mean it's perfect. What else can I do to this file? What else should I do to this file? Yes?
Just the highlights, just because her hair.
So you would like to bring in some more of her hair. You wouldn't like that to be all burned out. So that would be something you would consider doing, right? What about the contrast in this? What about the blacks and the whites in this? Do those matter? Do they play into this, or is it just all perfect right now? No. Do you just guess at this? Do you just start fucking around with that stuff and seeing what's going on? And, oh, wow, I hope if I keep screwing with this enough, something will look good on my screen, and then that's what I'll say okay to? Yeah, that's kind of the way most people work, right? That's not how I want you guys to work. Okay, so this is going to be the thing that I would suggest to you to do first. And you will see there's good things about this and bad. The first thing that I always do is I just hit the auto button. I hit auto button and see what happens. And when you hit the auto button, what it basically does is, what auto does is it tries to find the lightest thing in this image and make it white, and it tries to find the darkest thing in this image and make it black. It also tries to smooth out the contrast range between the two so that you keep maximum detail. It tries to do all of those things. However, in my opinion, it fucked the image up. I don't think this is a good thing. But the problem that I have with it is this, or the thing that I'm thinking is this. You see what it did here? It made some adjustments here. It said, okay, I think it needs a little bit less contrast. I think we definitely need to bring the highlights down, which is what you were saying. It's also saying I think we need to pump the whites up a little bit. We definitely need to richen the blacks up a little bit. That's what it's saying it thinks we need to do. I can take some of that and reject some of that. So my advice is that I know that the exposure was correct. It's saying it needs 3/4 of a stop more. I'm going to say, no, it doesn't. But I'm not going to throw away everybody else in here. I'm going to double click on the little slider. If you double click on the arrowhead right here, it'll neutralize out to 0. So that already starts to help me out. It's starting to bring it back down. So this is actually done exactly what you were hoping it would do. It's actually pulled the highlights back into her hair. How do I know that that's pulled the highlights back into her hair? How can I do I have a before and after here that I could actually look at? You could Command Z on this, but then you don't have something that you can flip back and forth really quick.
On the bottom, there's a little arrow.
Exactly. On the bottom guide down here, if you click the Y, you get a before and after, and you can actually see the difference, and it labels it as before and after. So up here at the top is the uncorrected version of this, and this after is the now corrected version of this, and I get to see both of these guys right now. And in looking at this now, what it seems to have done, it seems to have actually brought some of that hair detail back in. Now you may think I need more, you could go for more. You might believe all of that. In my case, I start looking at other places. I feel pretty good about what's going on here. What I'm struggling with, though, is this outfit that she's actually wearing. So when we talk about this outfit that she's actually wearing, what I'm concerned about doing in this is that I want a relatively rich outfit, but one of the biggest mistakes most people make in the beginning of working in Photoshop and Lightroom as well, it's a twofer for you guys, is that you end up actually making your stuff too contrasty and your blacks way too deep, way too rich, because they look great. Really deep blacks, really rich, a lot of contrast. But then you go to print it out, and it's in this. Her outfit would end up having absolutely no detail in it. It would be a solid black. So I'm going to give you some numbers that you actually need to keep in your mind to think about. Remember that I told you that in that white patch on that card, that 245 range should be where your high ends for your whites should actually really be, to actually print and be different than detail, to have detail that's different than the piece of paper that you're actually printing on, right? 255 is page white. 255 is the piece of paper you're printing on. 245 is, it's a very, very, very light gray, but it is not that pure white. So if you look at this area of your image, what of your image is actually going to be the lightest? Does anybody have any tricks up their sleeve that they could use to find out what the lightest part of this image actually is? Well, if you click, see these guys, your histogram that's up at the top here? If you click on this one right here, this will show you your shadow clipping. If you click on this guy right here, you'll see that there's a little bit of blue right underneath her armpit. That's actually telling you that area has gone to zeros. That's 0, 0, 0. If you click on this guy up here at the top, this will actually show you what is burned out to be pure white. Now, from my point of view, I don't really mind this going to page white right here. What I don't want to happen is to have this stuff go here actually all the way to be all the way blown out. However, the other thing to notice is if you look right under your histogram, there's an RGB readout right here. You do not have this in Lightroom. And if I start hovering over here, you can see that the RGB readouts that I'm getting of this white wall, which is the next lightest thing in this image, is 245, 245, 240, 246. This is a neutral high-end gray that will actually print. It will actually have texture in my print. So my high end is set correctly. It's the low end that's off, in my opinion. What needs to be fixed in this image, it's how dark this thing actually gets. That's the problem that I'm actually having with this guy. So the last number that I'm going to give you is this. I've given you the high-end number. The high-end number for printing is around that 245, 245, 245. That's a tone that I'm looking for. If I want highlight detail, I want there to be detail in those highlights. I don't want them blown out. You need to be looking in the 40s, the 240s. Make sense? for the low end, to have shadow detail in the low end on an inkjet printer, you want to be looking in the mid-20s. You do not want this stuff. If you want this thing, so for instance, if you look at this shirt right now, you can see it's supposed to be lighter on the front, on the very front part of her, but as you start to move around the side of her body, it's starting to move into more shadow. As we start to move around the side here, this is actually darker than the front part right here. And then finally, the area that's right here under her armpit should be black. That should have gone to black. But so to figure out where that shirt should actually be, you can do color pointers. You can drop down sampler tools. If you come up, and it's not the white balance tool, but it's the next one over. It is the color sampler tool. If you click on this and you come over onto your image, you can drop down a color point and it will stay there. You can see right now, I'm in this area that's getting near the shadow underneath her arm. I'm getting a readout underneath the histogram in the mid-30s. If you click, you will get a readout that stays permanently stuck there, and they're numbered. You can do like up to 8 of these or 16 of these. I forget what the limit is. But I've just put a number down there, and I've got my readout is sitting right up here at the top. And that is telling me what that value is. So for me, and this is what I want this to be shadow detail. I want it to print, but I want it to be the darkest that I can get, but still full detail. Does that make sense where I'm going with all of this? We good on this? So to actually get there now, I can change probably my shadow slider. So I'm going to change this shadow slider, and you will see that my readout up here at the top has now changed. And just by dropping that down, it was up around 35 or something like that. I've now actually got this thing dropped down to the 24s. This image will print like a son of a bitch now. Why? Because I didn't just randomly go in and start fucking with it. I started with neutral color. I started with perfect exposure. I pegged where my highlights should be. I pegged where my shadows should be. I trusted Auto to give me the contrast. Auto, the one thing Auto does well is it actually figures out the contrast. And what it's trying to do in contrast, it's trying to maintain the maximum number of discrete tones from black to white that you can get. So, and it does a good job of that. It simply looks at the scale of the image and it says, okay, we've got 128 tones. I'm going to spread that out. So we got all 256. This is how I color correct imagery. This is where I would start with this. Are there questions about this?
Did you say, what did you bring it down to?
I just looked. So I'm looking at this number up here. Did you get your color pointer down? Okay, and what's your color pointer read? You've got 2 color pointers down. And I don't know which number that is, so move off of it. That's the number 1 right there, which you got at 0, 0, 0, so you cranked your shadows down way too much. If that's what you changed. Let's start over again. Hit Auto. Good. Double click on this guy. That guy right there. Okay, that's fine. And now this number 1 point right here, you're still reading. Hit clear samplers. You have that sample point that's actually in there. You're not looking to do the blue part right there. That's deep shadow. You're looking to do the side of her boob right there. That's where you want to put that point. Because that should be detail, right? And you're in the 40s. Now drag your shadows down. So those, don't even look at her. Look at these numbers until they read mid-20s. Keep going. Boom. Yeah, it's not gonna be exactly, but you get close. Boom, right? So now look at the difference in the beginning and the end of this. This is the image that we started with. This is where we're at right now. What do you guys think?
What number should the highlights be at?
The highlights, again, should be stuff that you want to print. So I look at this area over here. You can put another color sampler point over there. Again, if you got the color sampler, I'm just looking at the building over here. I'm just clicking on that. It's in the mid-240s, which is exactly where I want it to be. That gives me 10 tones between the side of that building and page white. I can go from 246 to 47 to 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. There's 10 tones hotter than this. My piece of paper will be pure white. You will see the edge of this building on a pure white piece of paper because it is not pure white. If it was pure white, I would do the very same trick. I would start to pull my highlights down more. If I couldn't get it with my highlights, I would start to pull my whites down more. Finally, one last thing to consider in this, and now it's not really the case in this image, but it is the case in most images. What is clarity and vibrance? Can anybody explain either of these two to me? I thought you guys knew the develop module.
Clarity sharpens it in like a weird fake way.
Oh, I love that.
Overdo it.
Well, that could be your reaction to it. What clarity is designed to do is build contrast in the midtones, but it leaves the highlights and the shadows alone. It's a beautiful thing. So building contrast in the midtones actually increases the appearance of detail in the midtones. But it leaves the highlights and the shadows alone, which you want to do. We've just gone to all this trouble to set the highlights and the shadows where they should be. I want to leave those guys alone now. But I may want to pop a little more contrast. Her face looks a little flat to me. I may want to pump that up just a little bit. A clarity slider will actually do that, but you need to really be careful about using it. However, I will say to you guys, most images benefit from a small amount of clarity. And then finally, vibrance. What is vibrance? What is the difference in vibrance and saturation? Anybody? Vibrance is saturation, except it avoids Caucasian skin tone. So what it will do is it will actually, it does two things. It tends to look at colors that are not saturate, and it tries to saturate them more and avoid the colors that are already saturated. So if you've got an image like this, there's nothing in this image that's saturated at all. Possibly part of her hair, but that would really be about it. But you could have an image that had, you know, the really super hot red car in it, that kind of stuff, whatever, and you just wanted to pump up. You didn't want to hit the car any harder, but you wanted to pump up the grass that was on the ground behind it, whatever. Vibrance is a good one for that, but it also avoids skin tones, but Caucasian skin tone. So it stays away from yellows, and it avoids things that are already saturated. Whereas saturation just hits everybody equally. Make sense? So if you want to pump the saturation up on something that doesn't have, that already has saturation in it, vibrance is the way to go. On this image, we do not need to do that. Finally, one last thing to do, and it's this little, you can actually click on that before and after guy again. So this is now, hopefully, is our after. It doesn't look like it is our after.
Looks like there's a line right here.
Yeah. I'll just go ahead and keep it that way. Yes.
Oh, you can keep looking at it.
Yeah, it changes all through the whole thing. So I just want to make sure I'm opening the after. Yes.
You said you were like printing in London. We're printing here.
Yes.
Should we do the same thing to bring it down, or do you want us to leave it?
Oh no, I would definitely. These are not only good numbers for a good quality inkjet printer. These are great numbers for on screen. Yeah, it'll get you guys away from taking everything to zero black, because everybody just drives those blacks. Oh man, those blacks can't be any richer, and you end up with basically it looks like a negative. It looks like a two-tone negative. Yes.
In my after, a lot of the blacks are going out, so I feel like I did. But there is more blacks that are going out around here. So
No, those are blacks in here, and so your value. Let's see what you're reading right up in here, in this area right in here. Yeah, you're in your mid-20s. You're fine. This is a shitty. This hasn't been. That monitor hasn't been calibrated. That's your trouble. Okay, are there questions? Okay, so final thing. Everybody, look at this screen. Look at my screen really quick. There's a hyperlink at the very bottom of your page. If you click on that hyperlink, this thing will come up, and it will say, "This is how you tell Camera Raw how to bring this image into Photoshop." Now, we didn't come from Lightroom in this. We came from the Finder, right? We didn't start in Lightroom. These settings you have already set up in Lightroom to actually do this. Or remember, in Lightroom, if you're coming from Lightroom, you go up to the Edit menu, down to Edit In, and then it's Open as Smart Object in Photoshop, because we want to keep the raw data in this, right? We want this to be a smart object, right? We don't want to throw that raw data away. So in order to do that, we want to open this thing, not as an image, it's what it's ready to do right now. If we click on Open Image, it would bake this file with the settings that we've got going on here in Camera Raw, but then I would have a baked file. I would not have my raw data any longer. In order to change that permanently, you simply click on this Open in Photoshop as Smart Object. You don't need to worry. You shouldn't have any of these other things checked. You should have Adobe RGB as your space, 8-bit depth for your channel. You should not have any image resizing going on. You should have no input sharpening, output sharpening going on, and simply open in Photoshop as a smart object. Are we good on this?
Yes.
So you'll see what happens when you look at this image right down here on my screen. It says open as image. If you click on this and say OK, this thing changes to open object. If you temporarily want to change this, you just hold down the Shift key. If it's listed as open image and you hold down the Shift key, you will get open object. If it's open object and you hold down the Shift key, you will get open image. But at any rate, we want to open these as smart objects because you are smart people. You are not the other losers that are doing the other digital ones that are opening all of these files baked forevermore. Especially if they're files you care about that you are then going to do all this work on and then realize that when you get to me and retouching that they taught you how to do it wrong and really be pissed off. There's a woman out there who took my retouching class who you can speak to about that anger. Yes?
I clicked open object and it says it must be exercise before
That doesn't make any sense because you're not in Photoshop yet. It now looks like you are in, so go ahead and hit cancel and see what happens. It looks like you're opening. I don't know what this is. Hit OK and just see what it says because I have no idea what that means. I think you've got 2 files open. Click on this down. It's not, you need to actually go through the whole thing again. I have no idea what it did, why I did that. It shouldn't have. I'm going to hit open object. And this should have happened for you. We will go through yours again. This should have happened to you. So everybody, their file should have opened up in Photoshop. How do I know that this is a smart object? What little icon? The little icon that's right down here in the corner, in the lower right-hand corner in my layers palette, that lets me know that this is a smart object. If you double-click on that smart object to open it right back up, it opens right back up into Camera Raw with all of your settings intact. All the stuff that you did to it so that you can now tweak it and fine-tune it and do anything else you want. This is working for everybody, except for Lexi. Don't worry about making the changes because it's not going to matter. Just click on it. Yeah, you're good to go. We got that little guy in there. Good? Okay. Are there questions about this? Okay. I want to get through another 15 minutes. I take that back. Let's do a quick 10-minute break now. We've got to get through Photoshop. I've got printing reserved. I've got to get you guys on printers tonight. So I'm going to blow through Photoshop pretty quick, but I feel like we're making headway here. Are we good on this? Yeah. All right, let's do a quick 10-minute break, guys, and then we'll come back and wrap this up.
I'm thinking about a dog.
I'm sorry to bother you.
You're not bothering me at all.
Okay, so I've been having like a couple some issues at home today, and I just was wondering if it would be okay to leave my head out a little bit early.
Sure.
Like, yeah. Okay.
We've got the videos.
What, tonight? Oh, like
All of this is being recorded.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. I'll
Okay.
totally look in on it. Is there anything
Okay.
I need to do for the week?
Yeah, you're going to have to do prints. So do you know how to print from
Yeah, from
Photoshop?
last year I did it.
Okay, that's all. So you need to do your 5 top prints from your walk the thing
Okay.
and bring them in next week. We're going to critique prints.
All right, awesome. Do
Okay.
they have to be a certain size?
No, they
Right.
can be 8.5 by don't do little baby things, but 8.5 by 11 is fine.
Perfect.
Go.
Okay, thank you so
All
much.
right, sure.
Sir, how would you recommend going about